The internet can be pretty dark and full of terrors. Every week, we set out on a mission to promote atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. But how do we know if we're succeeding when the comment section looks like, well, a YouTube comment section? How do any of us really know if we are participating in a free-flowing exchange of information and ideas and not just digital mudslinging? We've all heard news stories about algorithms that prioritize user engagement over user experience, outrage over well-being. An online therapy survey of over 1,200 people suggested that 6 out of 10 Americans believe that social media increases their depression and anxiety, yet choose to use it anyway, suggesting that and admitting that it might be hard to stop. Is it really possible for our message to get out there? Or are we all just feeding the trolls in an endless cycle of ever-widening differences? That's our conversation today on Talk Heathen. So get out of the comment section and into our phone lines at 512-991-9242. Give us a call because the show is coming right now. Well, welcome everyone. Today is April 6, 2025. I'm your host, licensed professional counselor Christy Powell, and joining me today is master debater, workshop facilitator, and professional comedian, Sydney Davis Jr., host of the Growing Up Fundy podcast. Sydney, glad we're finally doing Talk Heathen together again.
Yay! Yeah, it's great to see you again, Christy. How are you doing?
Hey, I am in great shape. I went to my nephew's first birthday party yesterday. So honestly, I'm very excited to be here. And I feel pretty practiced at having dumb debates with small children.
You're like, I crushed it at that debate yesterday. By the way, they were not prepared. That's excellent. That's awesome. You know, I feel like kids' birthday parties are very underrated in terms of how fun they can be for adults. Not going to lie. I would love to be invited to more children's birthday parties, but, don't know enough kids, I guess.
It's nice when they're at that age where it's still kind of appropriate to like serve drinks and have an adult party. When they start to get a little older and it's more kid centered, then you're just sort of there. But no, it was a good time, and I'm looking forward to a good time today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be really interested to see what people have to say when they call in, chat, people listening.
Yeah, so please do, everybody. I mean, of course, Talk Heathen, we are open to all of your questions about religion, secular humanism, atheistic morality, cosmology, philosophy, science, history, life, the universe, and everything. But whatever is on your mind today, like I said earlier, Talk Heathen is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. We are a live call-in show with open lines. Call us at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to do all of that here in just a moment. First, let's bring in our producer, Richard, for the Talk Heathen to Me question of the week segment. Richard, what you got for us?
Hello, I would have a lot more if I can make sure I came in without the microphone muted. Doing a Johnny P there. It's, of course, time for our Talk Heathen to Me segments, where we get the question of the week. And last week we asked you, what exactly did God think Adam needed help with? And here are our top 3 answers. Number 3, Jason Techload. What exactly did God think Adam needed help with? Erectile dysfunction. I mean, fair.
Yeah.
Something
to do with it. Yeah, that's the dysfunctional part.
Very dysfunctional. I think anybody who creates a woman for a man after trying all the other options as a last resort, it can be classed as dysfunctional.
In that order, never put that together.
Number 2 is know what? God thought Adam needed help with the male loneliness epidemic, as we've just touched upon. Yeah, I think he was a teenager sat in his bedroom playing computer games and listening to Andrew Tate. I think that's what the problem was all along. Number 1 is Stephanie Roy. who says, what exactly did God think Adam needed help with? Better intimate partners after watching Adam try to help a sheep over the fence for hours. No doubt had wellies on the edge of a cliff, so the sheep pushed back more. Sorry, people of Wales. That wasn't aimed at you necessarily. So the prompt of the week for next week is, what would atheist heaven look like? So I'm really, really interested in you two's answer. I'm going to start with Christy. What would atheist heaven look like, Christy?
I think atheist heaven is just Sunday brunch before all the churches start to let out.
Yes. I was going to say atheist
free-flowing
heaven.
Mimosas. Yeah, go ahead.
Atheist heaven is probably a 1-year-old's birthday party where all the favors and the cake and the drinks are for the adults, but they claim it's for the children.
Right. Yeah. Basically.
Yeah. Great answers. Look, I want to see what the audience answers are. If you can put them down in the comments below, don't put them in the comment section at the side, down in the comments below, and we will get Katie and Johnny to go through and pick them for you next week. I'm going to jump out of here. Have a great show, guys.
Cool. Well, thank you for all of your support, Richard. We want to thank everybody on our crew cam, all of the folks that come and help Sydney and I put this show together and look so good doing it. Thank you all so much for all of your hard work. We've got a good number of people here.
Couldn't do without him.
All right. Well, Sydney, do you want to go ahead and jump into that first phone call?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to talk to Benji in Alabama, who I understand has some problems with society. Benji, what does that mean?
Good afternoon to y'all. Hope your day's going good. I brought this up a few weeks back. So my theology is pretty complicated. I'm a Gnostic, pretty much, and you don't really see many of those anymore. Like the old Tristan sets from like about 300 AD, roughly. So and a lot of those actually was tortured and killed after because of the Crusades. But my reason for calling today, I brought this up a few weeks ago, and I kind of took a non-conventional soft approach. I'm from Alabama, so of course that's the South. Florida's, southerner, but we're pretty much considered the South.
It's about as deep South as deep South can get. I hear you.
Right.
But yeah, so tell me, what are some of these concerns? You said you brought this up in the past. What is it that you're bringing up, and what maybe didn't get settled last time?
Yeah, I was trying to just kind of push across just kind of facts about society. Well, I'll tell you.
So hit me with the problem. Let's start there. What are your concerns here? Let's just dive right into it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just trying to be cautious of how I say stuff. But so people that say, "Oh, I identify as a basketball," or let me so that I'm following you and understanding you. Have you ever met anybody who says that they identify as a basketball, and what did they mean?
Yeah.
I was using that as an example. I'm talking about the new definition of gender versus sex.
Okay, so let's talk about the difference between gender and sex rather than some made up poisoning the well hypothetical.
Right.
Are you said that you called in about this before. It's certainly a topic we have discussed a lot on this show. So when you say that you're having concerns or issues with the quote new definition between gender and sex, let's get into that. What are your questions? What are your concerns?
Yeah, so, just to put this out there, 30 and 40 years ago, people would just entertain gender and sex because there was not people entertained them to mean the same thing. Like if you're born male,
Yes and no. Yeah, there is truth to that. I'm going to jump in and just say that that's kind of partially true. And a lot of that has to do with the poverty of English. Like the word gender didn't have the same usage in English just because we didn't really have a way of differentiating. That's not to say all people, because we can look at so many other languages that have always had these types of concepts. But English had to take a term from linguistics that we use to describe French and Spanish and these other like more gendered language. And then as a society, as we began to understand some of the differentiation between our social role and our biological identities and some of these pieces, it became a useful tool and went into further and further more widespread usage.
Well, right. I mean, over time it changes. But the issue that I had with that, well, a few things. One is that my definition.
What's the that here? I know I'm interrupting you a lot, and I don't mean to break up your flow so much. But when you say the problem I have with that, I'm not entirely clear on what the that is.
Right.
Oh, okay. So society's definition of gender now compared to what it used to be, to put it simply.
Okay.
The gender definition has changed dramatically in the past 30 years. For example, like I said earlier, most people would just say gender. Like you would see sets, on papers. If you fill stuff out, it would say sets, male or female, right? The gender idea, this new age crap of people, so if you're born male, and I'm just going to say it this way. If you're born male, and I'm pretty sure most people, at least where I am, would agree that if you're born male, you're going to always be male. Now, there is exceptions to that, obviously. There's some people that are born with both parts. There's, circumstances where you would have a sex change and you would be considered a female, I guess, technically. But the idea that you would be born male and then society would convince somebody that's born male, oh, well, actually, you would fit more easily as a female, and then then like people.
Yeah, that's a bad idea. We shouldn't do that. We're in agreement that somebody shouldn't be born male and then convinced by society that they are actually female. And I don't know anybody who's doing that. Sydney, go ahead.
Right. Well, and my first question for you, Benji, is in what way does this harm people? In what way are you harmed by the idea that somewhere somebody who is assigned male at birth might choose to identify as a female later in life, or as non-binary, or somebody who was born a female and assigned a female at birth might choose later in life, or might decide later in life, or feel later in life that they are actually male instead or transgender instead? I've always been confused at why that's a threat to anybody who is not being asked to change their gender, is not being tried. Nobody's trying to convince you personally to change your gender. How is that? What about this idea that somewhere out there, somebody you've never met and likely won't, wants to live a different lifestyle, wants to live the life of a woman or a man, the opposite of how they were assigned at birth? Why is that bad? How does that negatively impact anybody who isn't that person?
There's a lot of things to go over there. Like you just listed like 10 different things. And I was trying to keep track, but so basically, so for starters, if there's a person that's born a male and they want to be a female, that's fine to an extent if you have a sex change or something, or if you have a medical reason.
Flawed understanding of what's happening, though.
Right.
Like I know, again, I'm interrupting you a lot, but Sydney's question really came down to where is the problem? Like, what is the issue that's being caused?
Right.
And in order to kind of answer that question, we have to be sincere about this notion that somebody is born one way and is deciding to be another. That's a total misunderstanding of this newfangled gender phenomena that we're trying to understand.
That's what that is. That's this whole damn idea of this new age gender gender trap. Like That's what that is. That's people.
I've never
wait.
met
male,
anybody
and then
who was
they decide
born
they're female.
one way and
And
one
then,
like
you
who
know-
was born in one particular sex and then just decided or was convinced by society to be different. That's to really misunderstand
Right,
these
but
folks.
I'm not even taking a hard stance on this. Like that's why I'm trying to be conscious of what I say here, because I know that there's people in different situations, different parts of life, and I've been around a very long time. My other thing is that society in general has changed so much in the past 30 years. Just to kind of bring the point home here, and I'm not. And to clarify, I'm not homophobic or any of that. But
well, wait, what's the
in the
point though?
90s,
You said to bring the point home, and I'm still trying to figure out what is the main point you're trying to make, but two, what is wrong with the idea that somebody doesn't feel the assignment they were given at birth is the assignment they should live by? And how is that harming anyone around them who's not being asked to make that same change, who's not being asked to provide tax money for any kind of gender reassignment surgery for other people, who is not in any way impacted by this person's changes, whether they actually go under the knife and have gender reassignment surgery, whether it's more they want to change the labels that they use. I don't understand how that is a problem or how that's lessened society in any way, when in reality, if they didn't tell you they were a transgender person, you may not even know.
Okay, 3 different things to 3 points. One, people think it's wrong, not me in particular, but there's a lot of people that do. 2,
why does that matter?
Now, why are we citing then? Let's just go to number 2, because there are plenty of things that plenty of people think are wrong, but you're not one of them apparently. So let's just knock it down to 2 points. What are your 2 points?
Okay. Well, why is it today, in today's society, that even a young kid in some circumstances, depending on the situation, would be born a male and then all of a sudden decide, hey, I feel like a female?
Well, hold on a second, though. I don't think it's just today. I think today just happens to be the time they're allowed to speak about it.
But please, Sydney.
Like, I think transgender people and people who were assigned the incorrect gender at birth, I think they've always existed. We just live in a time now where they're allowed to speak on it and not be condemned to death or not be rejected by their community, whether it's, here in the United States or somewhere else. I don't think it's a case of, now in 2025, everyone's allowed to just pick whatever gender they want to be, which again, wouldn't even be an issue. In my opinion, even if that was the case, which it's not, I don't see how that's a problem. But I think what we're facing and what you're noticing is not that people who decide they were assigned the wrong gender at birth are just now existing for the first time in 2025, or that people are just waking up one day and deciding they were born a woman but want to be a man. I think we are just now living in a society where that is not something that gets you ostracized, and that's not something that gets you institutionalized, and that's something that you're allowed to speak on no matter what age you are and have these conversations about. So you're hearing more about it, and maybe that makes you uncomfortable, but I think it's a big problem when we label it as an issue in society versus just saying, I don't understand this and it makes me uncomfortable, and I would like for somebody to explain this more to me so I can learn more about it and maybe not be so uncomfortable.
Okay. I'm going to point on some stuff that you just said, because that brings the point home completely. Number one, everyone that I know, even the people in the old decades, 30, 40 years ago, this stuff wouldn't be happening then. If somebody was to come out,
they also didn't know how to use satellite phones.
Right. And also, I'm going to be honest with you, 1980s, 1990s Alabama probably isn't a place where this would be openly happening, where people would be having these conversations. I'm from Arkansas.
55 Alabama is not particularly a place where people are wanting to be having these conversations.
Right.
And none of that necessarily matters, because the people that you have surrounded yourself with are not the single and only source of good knowledge and information in the world.
Right.
I didn't say that, but I said it's a societal problem.
Why is it a problem?
And most of the time, Okay, well, let me just say this too, because this is something you said earlier.
We keep. I know that we're going back and forth, but we keep asking this singular problem. Sydney has asked like 4 or 5 different times. Where is the issue? Like, who's being hurt? What is the distress?
Right.
Can you demonstrate for me a example, an experience
Real
of harm?
Yeah.
Before you bring it home again, can you just answer that question? What is the harm that's being caused?
Let's go there. Psychological harm and mental harm and societal harm. Maybe not physical, but psychological. So
can you demonstrate it or point to it?
Yeah, of course. So I took notes, okay? If you're born a male, you are by definition a male. The definition of male and female does not change over time. So this idea that somebody can be born a male and then somehow by whatever means that it was a mistake when they have a penis and they're a baby and the doctor says, well, that's a male. And then later on, they're like, oh, well, they made a mistake. No, they didn't.
I'm not conceding your overly simplified understanding of transgender identities, but I am asking you to point out what harm is being caused by the issue that you're describing.
What you just said, and I took notes. So there is no wrong gender assignment, but there's no such thing as that. If you're born with both, that's a special circumstance.
But see, that's where I'm confused. Is you keep talking about special circumstances and then pretending like special circumstances don't exist. So if there are special circumstances and you agree that there are special circumstances, then could we not agree that somebody was born with male assignment or female assignment at birth, and because of special circumstances later in life, they do not live their life according to that assignment because they are a special circumstance in which that assignment was incorrect?
No, because the only medical special circumstance that is even possible based on our physical form of being a Homo sapien human would be either you're born with both, and that's really the only special circumstance. Other than that, if you have a penis, you're a male. If you have the other, you're a female. So that's
your understanding of the biology here and the born with both notions are as flawed as your understanding of transgender identities. I'm still waiting to hear an answer to the question of the harm that's being caused.
Exactly.
Well, transgender is that you're born with both parts.
No,
that's not accurate, but we can, you can throw out a million things and we can try to debunk them and swat them down, and we can try to explain and clarify and help you understand some of these issues that you are really grappling with. But I'm still we're trying to have a conversation. Sydney asked you a question. You keep making this claim. Can you talk to me about the harm that is being experienced here? Who is being hurt by whom? How?
Yeah, it's societal harm to society. It's societal harm to societal norms and the norms of communities and people at large. I mean,
but how?
Can you show me where your community was hurt?
Yeah, give us actual examples that you personally have experienced or seen.
I've been around a long time, and I can tell you that this is nonsense based on what even what you just said.
We're going in circles, Benji, and you're losing my patience a little bit. Who was hurt? Were you hurt? How were you hurt?
No, I'm saying that, okay, so in a situation where somebody is born a male, and then if you claim later on, oh, that's a mistake, I mean, it's not a mistake. There's only 2 options biologically unless you're born with both, and that's the special circumstance that I mentioned earlier.
So you're giving 3 options, which is really not biologically correct. You're still not answering the question. You're still not living up to your own fundamental claim that people are being harmed here. I guess I'll give Sydney another swing at it, but I'd really like for you to demonstrate or explain or describe who is being hurt. And if we can't even do that, then I think we may just need to move on. Sydney, what do you have here?
Let me try a different approach. Yes or no, Benji, are you single?
They're saying that somebody's born a male.
Wait, hold on. Are you single? Are you married? Do you have a girlfriend? Do you have what is your relationship right now, your relationship status? I promise there's a reason I'm asking this.
Relationship status with what? Friends, family?
Like, are you married? Do you have a girlfriend? Like, are you in a relationship right now?
Romantic partner of any type?
Girlfriends. I mean, I got one of my friends who's female that I'm friends with her dad. I've known their families for over 30 years.
Okay. Well, the reason I'm asking this is because oftentimes people, when they approach this topic as though it's a societal problem, what I've run into in the people I've spoken to is that what they're actually concerned about is that when they go to date a woman, maybe they'll find out the woman has a penis, or maybe they'll find out that the woman hasn't had gender reassignment surgery. Is that something that you're concerned about happening to you? Is that where this fear is coming from, that maybe you will fall in love with somebody who you later find out was like assigned a different gender at birth? Because I'm trying to figure out where the harm could be, or why you feel so strongly about this idea being harmful without any like examples of lived experience where this has harmed anybody. Just saying, oh, it harms society, it harms people, without any kind of examples. And so I'm curious, like, is it something you're worried about? Are you, for whatever reason, concerned that a transgender person or somebody who lives their life according to a gender that wasn't the one they were assigned at birth will somehow impact your life in a negative way? Like, I'm curious where all this concern has come from.
Yeah, I'm going to explain that. So a few things. So for one, it is actually a societal problem by definition.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not. I promise you it's not
happening. This wasn't going on 30, 40. I mean,
it was.
Yes, there was people in society that are born with both parts. Yes, that's been a thing. But the idea of somebody being born a male, all of a sudden now they're wronged for being born a male, all of a sudden labeled as a
Benji, we're trying to tell you, we're trying to help you understand that this has always been going on. We're trying to educate you in the idea that this is not a new thing. The only thing that's new is that there are no repercussions, or there are unfortunately, but there are no real legal repercussions at this time for people speaking out about these things. People are allowed to be transgender. They're allowed to live differently than the gender they were assigned at birth now, without being ostracized or put to death or any of the things that would have happened to them in the past. And in Alabama in the past, that was a bad thing people couldn't talk about. In the Middle East, that's been a bad thing people can't talk about. There are times and parts of the world where you're not allowed to openly be a transgender person. So I'm trying to help you understand that this is not a new concept. It is only a new idea to be public and open about it with minimal repercussions. Okay. This isn't a thing we invented in 2025.
This way. Well, okay, well, let me do it this way. Even if I was to agree with you that this idea of people being born male and wanting to be female has always existed, right? That doesn't make it correct. It doesn't make it accurate. It doesn't even make it societally right as far as norms go. Now, norms trend over time.
It doesn't make it wrong either. But so far, I've given examples, but you've never given examples. You haven't given any kind of example. So at the moment, based on the evidence each side has given, I would say that we've provided lots of evidence that this has always been a thing. This is not a new idea. This is not harmful to society in any way. And so far, I haven't heard a single real example or any type of evidence whatsoever from your side that this is in fact harmful, or that it is quote unquote wrong, other than your thoughts and opinions on the idea that it's wrong.
It's not my thoughts and opinions. I gave several examples. I debunked what you said. I actually proved, yes, I did. And I proved, but because one of the things that you said, ma'am, was that you said people can be born male, and it would be wrong for them to be labeled as a male. That's what you claimed. And
no, that's not what I said.
That wrong.
That's not what I said. Benji, you got to at least quote me right. I didn't say that. I never said that was wrong. You got to at least quote me right, Benji. Come on.
If somebody is born male, they're a baby and they have a penis and they're born male, it wrong?
Let's make a distinction there. Being born with a penis and being born male are not actually synonymous things.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. What do you think male and female mean? I mean, if you're going to change definitions and
not changing definitions. I've spent so many hours talking about this subject on this very network that I guess I hesitate to go into all the particulars when I have had the wonderful opportunity to interview medical doctors and to interview biologists and people who are so much more equipped to walk through all of these particulars. But let's just say that biological sex is not as straightforward as looking between somebody's legs and saying, oh, that's a male, that's a female. Even if we are relying on this concept of biological sex and saying that gender is ridiculous and should be thrown out, which is not my position. But even if we're just looking at biological sex, we want to be looking at gamete size. We want to be looking at actual like phenotypical expression, penis and vulva, and these kinds of things. We want to be looking at hormone levels. We want to be looking at chromosomes. And there are so many different complications here. Benji, I appreciate your feelings about all of this, and we would love to talk it through with you. But when you call up adamant that you either have a penis or a vagina, or sometimes there's an exception where you have both, you're just not doing good biology. And really, this is an issue that goes so far beyond biology, but you're basing all of this on some pretty flimsy misconceptions. And quite frankly, you don't seem to be taking in a lot of new information or answering our really fundamental questions about your concerns here. So, you know, if there's nothing else to really add beyond that, I would encourage you to maybe expand your understanding of biological sex just as a place to start.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to correct you on what you just said first before we go into that. Biology, by definition, is the study of living organisms. That's what biology is.
Okay.
Male and female are absolutes. They don't change over time. This idea of, well, if you're born a male and somehow you can then become a female, it's ridiculous. It is just.
Benji, can you tell me, I'm going to ask one question, and then honestly, I'm probably just going to get bored and walk away. But let me just ask you this one question. Is there anything, any concept, any aspect in biology where you can ever say, well, you're either this or you're that? You're either blonde or you're brunette. You're either tall or you're short. Or is literally everything in biology pretty bimodal at most, or working on some kind of spectrum?
There's not a spectrum. It's absolute. Let me ask you.
Okay, so even if I, just for the sake of argument, concede that sex can be absolute, sure. Is there anything else in biology that you can think of that's absolute in that same way? That members of a same species are going to be either this or that with nothing at all in between?
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me what it is.
The 23rd chromosome. The 23rd chromosome. That's what that is.
So it's either XX or XY is your contention, that absolutely every single person on the entire face of the planet Earth has either an XX or an XY chromosome?
Well, remember, Benji did say there are special exceptions. So apparently he doesn't even think that's absolute, because he said there are special exceptions, which I agree with. There are special exceptions.
Yeah, depending on who you ask, somewhere between like 2 and 10% of the population even.
Yeah.
I don't know. If only there was like a word for these folks. Sydney, I think I'm just about ready to move on, but is there anything else you want to talk about here?
I just wish that people would, when they call in, they would be honest when they just don't like something, as opposed to trying to make it, it's factual. Benji, I would much prefer if you would call in and say, this is why I'm uncomfortable with this, or this is why I don't like this, instead of trying to make it a societal thing or a problem thing or something that needs resolved, Maybe that's just
Do you want to talk about your feelings for just a moment before we wrap it up?
I want to point something out. So I have a question for you, okay? And this kind of sums up the whole issue. Do you think that the 23rd chromosome is absolute? Because it is, and it absolutely is. And that's
I'm not a geneticist, but I can tell you plainly it isn't. So go find me an article of well repute. Find me any sort of scientific documentation on any level that says that there's only 2 forms of the 23rd chromosome, and send it to me. Send it to me at tv@atheist-community.org. Get that information to me, and I will share it widely. I'll be waiting around my inbox, and I do appreciate your time. I appreciate your call. All right. Well, Sydney, we wanted to get into the question of internet mudslinging today, and this is definitely a topic that touches that button. So, I don't necessarily want to beat up on Benji while they're not here, but I do want to take this next call from D, which is, I suppose, kind of in response. So let's curate this comment section a little bit further and see what D has to say.
Perfect.
Hey, D, we're glad to hear from you.
Nice.
Howdy.
Nice to talk to you again. Hi, Sydney. It's been ages. I'm so glad to see you.
Thank you. It's good to hear you.
So what's on your mind today?
Well, Mr. B, so many questions that I would want to ask him if he were here.
Sure.
Has he ever been any more than 50 miles outside his own hometown in his entire life? He says he knows people like that and that he's not a homophobe or anything like that. That is bullshit. You are a transphobe. You are ignorant. You have showed it over and over again. You don't care about people. All you care about is your little book that tells you what to do and what to think and how.
Yeah. For a conversation that, was allegedly about biology, as Sydney pointed out, this definitely got pretty emotional in a lot of ways. So, to that end, D, I guess I'm interested in what you would like to say to somebody like Benji, or what you would want to share about, the emotions that go into all of this. Oh, you know what? I do believe that we actually have lost the connection with D. So,
do you mind
definitely
if I make
a hot button issue in a lot of ways.
Do you mind if I just make kind of a comment to what D was talking about in case they hop back on?
Yeah, please.
Benji was talking about how he's from Alabama, and then he said, people around me say this, people in my community are impacted this way. There is a part of me who remembers what it was like to be in the state of Arkansas, to be young, to think that I was liberal, to think that I was open-minded, and to still have very small-minded ideas, very small-minded opinions. I was one of those people where when somebody would say, well, why would so-and-so make a bad president? I would go, oh, well, I don't have time to do the research for you, blah, blah, blah. Those people that go, I'm not going to finish this argument. I have a job to do or whatever. I was one of those people who took not having an answer as being called ignorant instead of actually taking that question and thinking, wow, that's a really great question. I should think about this for a minute. Anytime I was approached with something that I didn't understand, I took it as an attack. I took it as an insult. I took it as somebody calling me stupid instead of taking that opportunity to engage with somebody and say, that's a really good question. I don't actually know the answer to that. That's really going to open some doors for me in terms of what I think and what I feel. And it wasn't until I was in college and I joined the debate team where I was in a style of debate where you're not only given the topic, but you're given the side of the argument that you're going to be on. So you really don't have a choice. Before I was forced to do research in the antithesis of what I thought I believed. And I started to learn these are great questions. I didn't know all of this information that I'm now being forced to research and find out and learn about. And so part of me wants to say that I sympathize with some of his upset feelings and some of he hears something that makes him uncomfortable and he just gets mad about it because I remember what it was like to not really have a lot of access to alternative ideas, alternative people, alternative information. But the other part of me says I don't sympathize, because if you are given the opportunity, like he was just given by calling in on this channel, there wasn't really stuff like this when I was in college, and you don't take that opportunity and you don't choose to engage with people and at least hear them out on whatever the topic is, whatever the matter is, and you choose instead to say, no, I actually called in with the thoughts and the opinions I have, and I'm not changing them, that's where you lose me. They don't call in to learn anything new. They call in to spew what in their town they're allowed to spew all the time and just be agreed with the way that they're used to. And the minute that somebody doesn't agree with them, instead of thinking, whoa, this is the first time I've ever heard this, what's going on? They think, nope, boop, hang up, or I'm done, or you're wrong.
Sure.
And it's painful to remember being that person and thinking I was so right all the time about everything. And luckily having people in my life that I respected question me constantly and say, why do you think that? Where did you get that? How did you come up with that? And I just wish that people like Benji would be more accepting of those opportunities to learn and grow and change and, expand their mind instead of just kind of stay comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I count myself among this group, but I'm always amazed at how people's philosophy and at how their understanding of the quote unquote objective facts can be changed by queer cinema. Just the experience of actually hearing some of these stories and embracing some of people's experiences can really open minds.
Yeah.
We do have Dee back on the line, so let's touch base with them quickly. Dee, is there anything that you would want the Benjis of the world to understand about your experience?
Yes, sir. Thanks. I was a little hot there. I apologize. I'm calm now.
No, it's not.
Valid, I get it.
Thanks for bringing me back. No, I spent over 4 decades wrestling with my self-image, my gender identity. I subsumed those feelings and my identity in order to avoid embarrassing my family, in order to avoid losing precious relationships, in order to avoid being marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
This is not societal harm. This is personal harm. Okay. Mr. B, I'm not, we would have never met except for this show.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to generalize my life, my experience, my losses as crap is just plain disrespectful and cruel. It's a level of cruelty that we have. Our society now has permission to be cruel.
Yeah.
I hear that. And I think it's fair to assume, Dee, that you didn't just, weren't just told that this is who you are and then decided that it wasn't true, that there was a lot more nuance, a lot more complication to that.
It like I said, my journey is 4 decades in the making. It began when I was in my mid-teens.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been emotional. It has been physical. I, waited until I was 61 years old to say,
Wow.
this is who I am. And
Wow.
for Benji to sit there and just dehumanize me like that, I am angry. I am hurt. I am incredulous that people are so stupid and so willful with the information that's available today that the only value they can find is in a 2,000-year-old book that wasn't even written for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had it. He has no right, no individual has any right to call my life crap. And if you're that miserable, then I feel sorry that your life must be such crap to feel that way.
I appreciate you honestly speaking on that emotional level and sharing that with us and with the audience today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate the show. Hopefully we can only go up from here, right?
Right. I do have a question for Dee, if you don't mind.
Sure.
If somebody, if you could explain to someone maybe a common misconception, if there's something that you wish you could tell somebody who doesn't quite understand what it's like to live a life similar to yours, what do you wish people would know, or what would be the first thing that you would explain to people or express to people if you could?
This is not a phase. This is not a wake up Monday morning, I'm a girl, and wake up Tuesday morning and say I'm a guy. It doesn't happen like that. It is not all of a sudden. It is not society putting pressure on you to be a different gender. It's society putting pressure on you to be someone that you are not at your core.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not doing it to offend you. We're not trying to live our lives peacefully in order to offend everyone else. I live my life to avoid offending people. And there's only so much of that a person can take.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, to Sydney's point earlier, like where is the harm
understand.
that's being caused here? And it doesn't seem to be on
Exactly.
Benji's side of the aisle.
Exactly. He wouldn't even be honest about that.
Mm.
Trying so hard not to sound transphobic when he clearly is, and would not be honest about his personal feelings. And I listen to the younger people that call in and talk about their experiences and their thoughts and their feelings, and they have so much more courage than this guy has ever had. And if there's a young person out there listening right now, just know you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Just know that it's okay to be yourself.
Well said. And I really appreciate again. Yeah, I appreciate again your bravery in sharing all of that with us. And I hope that that message gets out, and that, yeah, there is value to having these conversations, so that, you know, if you are in that place of not understanding, not knowing, not being able to really feel like you can connect with yourself, that there's a community for you, that the internet, for all of its foibles, can help be a part of that.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is the first call we got is about how lifestyles like that are harmful. And yet I'm watching the chat, and so much more constructive conversation and storytelling and experience sharing is going on during Dee's call than during the call about how harmful a life like Dee's is. And people are excited to hear from Dee, and they're sharing their stories. And I'm watching them say, you know, I felt similar. I was raised similarly. I thought the same thing. My cousin or my brother had the same experience. And so I'm thinking, how not only is this not harmful, but I'm watching it in real time be the opposite of harmful and help people talk and share and relate to one another in a way that we didn't see during the first phone call.
Right. I just didn't want his voice to be the last word on it here.
Sure.
So thank you for giving
Thank
me
you,
the
Dee.
opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your call. I hope that you'll take care of yourself. It is natural, healthy, and reasonable to feel stirred up after something like this. So be kind to yourself, and thank you again for giving us a call.
Thanks, Christy. Always a pleasure to speak with you. And Sydney, I hope you're going to be around a lot more because I really enjoy you.
Thank you, Dee. It was great to hear from you.
Well, take good care. Yeah, well, so we've got some super chats coming in. I think a lot in response to that first call with Benji. So let's hit on those before we move on. I've got first and foremost $5 Canadian from what I'm going to go with as David Haxor, who's really going out of his way to make sure that that name is very difficult to pronounce. But David, if that is your screen name, says this caller is having a hard time with nuance, and then adds $5 more saying, I've learned that when people say something is absolute, it's a sign they don't know what they're talking about. That's a pretty fair point.
Yeah. Yep.
$10 more American from Miranda Rensberger, who says, I would recommend that Benji watch Forrest's Sex and Sensibility video. Great info on the nuances of sex, gender, and the differences between the two. Benji could learn a lot. I'll say that, I mentioned earlier, I've gotten to speak to some really brilliant people who have a much more sophisticated understanding of the genetics and the biology of all this. Forrest, I count chiefly among those folks. And he and I have had some great conversations on this network or on this channel, as well as on secular sexuality about this topic. So if you are like already raging to scream something into the comments section, or if, like Sydney pointed out, you're interested to sincerely learn more, some of Forrest's work is a great place to look. And then finally, $5 from K-Dub, who says, me too, Sydney. I'm liberal, but grew up sheltered and naive in BFE. I had to educate myself and am still learning. So say we all, K-Dub.
Never done learning.
Yeah. All right. Well, Sydney, are you ready to talk to Lisa in Canada?
Let's do it.
All right. Lisa's question is about atheistic morality, one of my favorite subjects. Lisa, what's on your mind today?
Hi. So I'm an atheist myself. I make content on, atheism versus theism on some of my social media stuff. And when I come into contact with theists, this is particularly more so Christians, sometimes Muslims. They assert that they are somehow morally superior to me, and they say, well, you don't have a construct, like a framework of what is moral. You're borrowing from the Christian framework that was instituted in the U.S. or North America, and
never mind where that Christian framework came from or was begged, borrowed, and stolen from. But yeah, okay, sure. Right. I hear that.
Right.
And I don't know always what to say. And it's not because I know that. It's not because I think they're right. I know they're wrong. It's just, it's so insulting to have people justify barbarism in the Bible, telling me that I don't have morals when I don't need a book to know that it's wrong to murder people, right? So how would you as an atheist respond to that? I just find it's incredibly insulting, and it seems like they're just not interested in listening to anything outside. And I want to specify, this is not all Christians. This is not all monotheists. Sure. This is just, some of the more, how do I say this? Some of the more indignant ones, I guess you could say, the ones that are so against people having questions about God or the existence. And this is not everyone, so I don't want to generalize. It's just like the thing is that like I will respond with kind of my morality personally comes from empathy and how my actions impact the well-being of others. That's how that's where my morality comes from, because you can objectively tell when someone is in distress based on their experience from another person's actions. So that's how I kind of derive my morality from. But it kind of seems like no matter what you say, no matter how no matter what reason you give, despite all the research we've done in social psychology, it's just, if you don't adhere to their specific belief style, you have either A, the wrong morality, or B, no morality. And it's very frustrating to have that conversation because, like, we want to have productive conversations, right? Like, I mean, I'm just wondering, sorry to babble on too much. I just wanted to.
No, not at all.
I think you're really on the right track. I think Sam Harris would define morality as having to do with the well-being of conscious creatures. We might say like the beneficence or non-malfeasance towards conscious creatures. His book, The Moral Landscape, is definitely something that I would encourage you to check out. I think it does a great job of laying out some of these arguments. So, when you talk about empathy and you talk about seeing distress, I think that we can use reason and science to, if not always perfectly like measure and address in every way that distress, we can certainly see it and work to understand it and then to do things about it. Sydney, how does that grab you?
So, you bring up some interesting points. I tend to think more on like a more basic level when people ask me this question, just because in my opinion, if heaven is literally the only reason they're not murdering and raping people, please stay religious. That's what I always say to people. I'm like, listen, if the only reason you aren't doing these things is because you get a reward afterward, please continue to go to church. That's phenomenal. But also, I think with a lot of the people that you're describing, there is nothing you can say to change their mind. There are some arguments that literally aren't worth having because the person comes in having already decided how they feel, and there's nothing that you're going to be able to say to change their mind. 2, just because someone says that they have a lot of like evidence and reasoning to back up the fact that they believe that atheists don't have a moral compass of any kind doesn't make it true. Just because they assert this, they say, well, atheists don't have morals. I can say whatever I want. I can spew my opinion all day long, but that doesn't ever make it fact. That never makes it something that has to be agreed upon by another party. I can say cheese is gross, and somebody's like, actually, it's not that bad. And I'm like, nope, cheese is gross. The end. What do you have to say about that? That's just my opinion. That's not factual. That's not scientific. That's no matter how much I believe it in my heart and my soul, that doesn't make it the truth. But I would focus more on how you feel. You're like, I don't want to kill people. I simply don't. I don't want to steal. I simply don't. That's just how I feel. It's not good for the tribe. It's not good for me as a person, whether it's because it's illegal. I would simply remember that you are alive, you have these thoughts, you are a good person, you do have morals, and you have all of these things regardless of whether or not the Bible exists. And Christy, you brought up a good point. The Bible is an amalgamation of other religions, other thoughts, other things that have existed. And they took all those ideas, they made the 10 Commandments, and then they said, see, look, you're copying my 10 Commandments. When in reality, murder is bad regardless of what religion you're in. I've yet to find, with the exception of the religions that maybe did ancient sacrifice back in the day, where murder was just allowed willy-nilly. You could just kill people for no reason. That's always been bad for the tribe. That's always been bad for survival. That's always been frowned upon. And it's ridiculous to think that this version of Christianity that we go by now in the Christian Bible is the reason why nobody does anything bad. I feel like that was kind of a long-winded way of saying they didn't make it up. They didn't invent it. It's ridiculous to assume so. And it's actually kind of concerning to think about the only reason they're not terrible people is because they want to go to heaven afterward. I would argue that atheists who have a moral compass are actually better than Christians who have a moral compass because they don't think there's a prize at the end. They don't think there's any reward they're going to get in the end for being a good person and caring about people. They're just good people and they just care about people. Now, not to say that all Christians are only kind because of heaven at the end, but these ones that you're describing that are militant, that are openly saying without a shadow of a doubt, atheists don't have any moral compass, those are the same people that concern me greatly, with the idea that they're just doing it for the reward at the end, and maybe we should focus more on that being of concern than where an atheist gets the idea that murder is wrong, or that certain crimes, they don't want to commit those crimes if they don't have a moral compass.
Right. The other thing I hear people, and again, this is only the militant kind of people. I've seen people host lives where, the prompt at the top is atheism is a mental illness, and I'm just like, are you? Is it like some of the times I'm like, no, not worth it. They're just rage baiting.
Haters are gonna hate.
But I think there are people just kind of like, I guess I don't understand. I intellectually understand it, but deep within me, I don't understand how someone could dislike another person so much just for being skeptical.
Because it's a threat.
Thing. I don't know how you could not challenge, what is wrong with how we learn about things, how we uncover new knowledge, how we gain insight isn't by blind obedience. It's, challenging things, critical thinking,
if you're going to have an in-group, you've got to have an out-group. And if your in-group is going to be right and great and perfect, then your out-group has to be terrible. And it's a flawed and irrational way of thinking. It's, naive tribalism, but it's part of our nature. And it's something that if we aren't mindful, thoughtful, careful with, we can really let take over our personality. And I think everybody in this conversation has experienced that from others.
Right. And if you're somebody who really wants to believe in the absolute truth of the Bible, hearing even one thing that makes you question even one thing that is said in the Bible pokes a hole in the idea that the Bible itself is infallible. So if you're that person, you would rather think in all absolutes, like, no, atheists cannot be correct. It's a mental illness. No matter what they say, it's something coming from a mentally ill person, than risk the idea that if even one thing is not true about what the Bible says, that risks many, many other things not being true about what the Bible says.
I see. Okay. Well, I just wanted to hear what your thoughts and opinion were on that. Thank you for letting me talk and having a good chat. So.
Yeah, no problem.
Absolutely. We appreciate your call. Yeah. You have a great rest of your weekend.
I hope your Sunday goes well.
We got a little bit more show to do, and I'm hoping it goes well too, instead of just turning into, again, that YouTube comment section. So thanks so much for your time, Lisa. Take care. Okay, well, we've got at least one more call that I'm excited to get to. But before we do, I want to make sure to thank our top 5 patrons, as we do every week. This week, that call goes out to Oops All Singularity, Dingleberry Jackson, Kalevi Helvetti, Brian Zupke, and J.A. Carlton. Our honorable mention this week is at number 6, Russell Jensen. Thank you to everybody who gives to our Patreon. If you want to have your name read out loud here, get with us at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And on that note, we have started recording the Talk Heathen Discord after shows for all levels of paid patrons. So please join us there. And with that, I suppose we can jump into, let's see, we've got a moment getting that next call. I don't know, Sydney, how do you feel about the way that all of this is going, your experiences with debate and some of the conversation we're having today.
Yeah. So for anybody who's watching and hasn't heard me talk about this, I've been involved in professional debate for many years, for at least going on 15 years now. And something that people forget or don't know at all, because when you're confronted with a debate, when somebody confronts you with a question and they expect an answer, of course your brain goes, oh my gosh, I have to answer this question, I'm freaking out. But what they don't understand, and what will help you so much in life, is if you recognize, one, just because you're asked doesn't mean you owe anybody an answer. Like, just because somebody confronts you with a question doesn't mean you have to answer it. And that person, maybe you're not in a place where you can answer it. Maybe you are busy. Maybe you just don't want to have that conversation. The other person will always equate that to losing. They will always take that and go, oh, so you're going to lose, you can't answer this question. When in reality, it shouldn't even be about winning or losing to begin with. I think a lot of times people confront other people with debates and with arguments because they just have a lot of feelings and they need to steamroll someone, or they need to just be aggressive. And they're told that atheists are going to be mean back to them, or they're told that atheists are going to say all these like talking points that Christians get. So one, you don't owe anybody an answer. Two, it's not about being right or wrong. So maybe I, in their opinion, lost. I'm going to sleep fine that night. That's not going to impact my life in any way. If somebody were to call in with something and somehow get me, I'm going to sleep fine, because that's part of being a human who's constantly growing and changing. You don't have to absorb everyone's opinion as facts about yourself. Just because a Christian in Louisiana thinks that Sidney Davis is wrong and stupid. Okay. Like,
no one's keeping score of the points in this, like Lincoln Douglas. We don't owe it to anybody to win. Right.
Well, and also, like, let's just say you engage in the conversation. Maybe you got the time. Again, regardless of what happens, you're going to be the same person when you're done. You're going to still go home to the same house. You're going to sleep in the same bed. You're going to have the same pets. So approaching these conversations as though they're opportunities as opposed to debate will really help you, as they can be opportunities to ask those people questions you've always wanted to ask a Christian. It's a great opportunity to ask them to clarify. One of my favorite things to do is when somebody presents something as an absolute, like, no, atheism is a mental illness. I love to ask them follow-up questions about it and let them continue to speak. And then as they continue to speak, continue to ask them questions about it. Because one, it gives me time to think about what I'm going to say in response. Two, it helps me recognize maybe unsteady points in their point of view, because you ask them a question, you give them the opportunity to speak, and they don't really know what to say because it's off script a little bit. The script that they were given by whoever gives these scripts to people who come to us, and say like, no, you don't have any morals. But also recognizing that whether or not you want to engage in that conversation is totally up to you. You don't owe anybody that conversation. It doesn't make you a bad atheist or a bad content creator if you don't have answers to everything. In fact, being able to take the questions you don't have answers to with you and to look them up and think, what would I say in the future if somebody were to ask me this again? Great learning opportunity.
And you can participate in the conversation and still not have the answers. Like, I don't know how the universe started or was created, and I'm okay with saying that. Right. The fact that you believe that you do know how the universe began doesn't make you right. It doesn't make me wrong.
Right, exactly. You're allowed to have differing opinions on things, but I encourage people to not have a feeling that they claim is fact just because they feel that way.
Yeah. Well, so what is your background in formal debate, and is that translatable to some of these online discourse centers?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, I joined a professional debate when I was in college. I got a scholarship to go to school and be on their debate team. And I was on International Public Debate, which is a forum where you get told what your topic is, and you get told what side of that topic you're going to be on, and you get told who your opponent is going to be. So you don't have any control over the environment in which you're about to enter at all. And then you get 25 minutes to prepare your arguments, whether you're affirmative, for, or a negative against. And so I started doing that in college, and I learned a lot. That's how I learned that I was a liberal Democrat, because as I started doing research on topics, I started realizing, one, I was lied to about what a lot of this information actually is by people who just wanted me to stay conservative. And two, it turns out I actually agree with a lot of what I'm learning right now that I thought I disagreed with. And so because of that, I went from novice, which is beginner, all the way to professional. I skipped varsity entirely and I went to professional because I just enjoyed having these conversations. But also the great thing about being a professional level debater is you can continue to debate at tournaments even when you're done with college. So a lot of your opponents will be Fortune 500 lawyers, coaches from other teams, professors at universities, because once you're pro, you stay pro. And so that I really took that into life kind of as an opportunity to learn from people. And when I started my podcast, I started using a lot of the, I don't even want to say tactics, skills, I would say, with my guests that I learned in debate. So for example, the asking questions. When you're in debate, you think, oh, I have to have a response to this, no matter what they say. Feel free to ask questions. Asking questions is a response. Somebody says, I think transgender people are a problem. Instead of saying, no, they're not, you say, why do you think that? What's an example of a problem that you ran into with a transgender person? And very much like we saw earlier, there really wasn't an example other than feelings, which aren't facts.
Or ignoring the question and sort of repeating these other talking points and, obviously just laying on claims without evidence after claim after claim.
Yes. And so I've been coaching debate for many years as well, because I think debate skills are such an important life skill. It's not just something you should do for a team in school and then be done with. I think debate is so important, especially now in today's times, learning how to constructively host a debate with a person as opposed to just win, lose. No, you're stupid. Well, I'm going to hang up. Fine. I'm going to hang up too. There's an opportunity to learn, but there's also an opportunity to teach. And what a lot of people don't realize is if you've had a very successful debate with somebody and you leave them with ideas to think about, you're likely never going to see the actual successful outcome. But the people they engage with from here on out will see the successful outcome of the questions you ask them that stuck with them for a while, that maybe changed their perspective. So if you enter a debate thinking, one, there's not a winner or loser, two, I can ask any question I want, and three, I'm likely not going to see the impact that I have on this person in real time, it'll change your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've always gotten the impression that debate is almost less about like doing a good job and more about avoiding mistakes. Does that feel accurate at all?
Debate can be avoiding mistakes is a good one. Learning from those mistakes, because the number of debates I've left where I'm like, oh, I should have said this, like, oh, I could have said that, like, oh, if only learning from those mistakes and avoiding them in the future is very much what it's about. But for lack of a better term, it's also kind of about mind tricks a little bit. So when you've asked somebody 21 questions in a conversation, in their mind, you've been going back and forth when really they've just been giving their perspective every time you ask a question, and they still feel like there was a lot of engagement and they still feel like they were heard. That's kind of like, again, for lack of a better term, I don't like to use the term mind games, but it is kind of a mind game that you can play on people where I don't know if you can relate to this experience. Have you ever been on a date where the person talked to you the whole time and then later we're like, wow, we really connected just then. Yeah. And like you didn't say
really?
A word.
Can you tell me anything about me?
Yes. You want to have that experience. You want them to leave that experience feeling like they were heard. They really did something there. They really laid down their thoughts and opinions. You listened to them, you heard them out, and man, y'all really connected. When in reality, you just asked them questions about themselves and didn't argue with them and weren't mean to them the way that they heard atheists were supposed to be to them all the time. And then they left really feeling like they did something. So yeah, I would say that avoiding mistakes as us, like as our side, as atheists and like an atheist versus theist debate is important, but also learning ways that you can kind of make people feel heard and seen while also not making them feel like they won anything is a skill that's important and that you can learn with practice.
Yeah, well, so before we jump back on the lines, are there any mistakes that you feel like you can really highlight for us? I mean, I think we all know we shouldn't be getting too personal and, don't get too emotional. But really, with your expertise, what would you recommend, particularly when we find ourselves on Facebook or in the YouTube comment section or whatever else?
That's such a good question. My first thing would be, is it going to do anybody good? Sometimes you're forced into conversations that, you don't have the opportunity to really opt out of before it happens in person or something like that, like at family gatherings. But if you have the opportunity to avoid it, and for a fact, just by looking at it, that it's not going to do you any good, we have this drive to jump in and have, thoughts and opinions everywhere, but sometimes they're just a waste of everybody's
who's going to benefit from this argument?
Right. The biggest one I would say is people understandably let other people get under their skin way too fast. Like, they asked me a question and now I'm mad. It's like, no, wait, think about it. Right. Because, people love to lob insults. People love to offend you, to get you riled up during these arguments. If you can't get riled up, that's actually way scarier. If they have an opponent that literally can't get riled up, or like, I'll even laugh when they insult me, it really throws people off, because again, they're told atheists are going to yell at you. People, or even if it's not a religious debate, they're told like, oh yeah, get them worked up, get them heated. They won't be able to think straight. But if you recognize that this is a conversation that's going to happen whether you get heated or not, you'll have a much easier time keeping a level head, responding, feeling like you're making some headway if you don't get worked up. If you just, no matter what they say, there's nothing they can say that will take away the life you live after this conversation's over. And recognizing I'm going to keep my cool because I feel like I'm on the right side of this conversation. I know I'm going to be the same person after this is over. I know that no matter what, they're probably going to tell their friends they won anyway. I love those clips where it's like, so-and-so destroys so-and-so. And then the other side is like, no, the other person destroyed them. And it's the same clip. And you're like, I don't know how to discern this. Don't get heated. Don't let people get under your skin. Be perfectly comfortable saying you don't have the answer to everything. Be perfectly comfortable when they say, well, how did the planet come about then? How did the universe come about then? Being like, I'm not a scientist. I don't know. Great question. And you'll find that if you can really hone in those skills, you'll be able to take those skills into more than one facet of your life. And then you'll find that at work, you're not getting heated or stressed as often. In your relationship, you're not getting as heated or stressed as often. When you talk to your parents, maybe you don't enjoy talking to them very much. And now you recognize you can have cooler headed conversations with them because you've practiced this before. And it's just taking those skills with you will be beneficial to your entire life.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so I heard what you said about not necessarily going in with a intention to like win. You know, we're not necessarily scoring points out in real life, and asking that question of, so what's the point, or who's benefiting from all of this? So I guess I have to ask, like, how do we know if we're actually making a difference, and how do we know when to stop?
That's actually a really, really good question. Ways to know when to stop is, one, if you recognize that person came in with an agenda and they're not leaving without that agenda. Very much like our first call today. I believe that gentleman had an agenda and there was nothing we could say, unfortunately, to change his mind on whatever it was he was thinking.
Or even add facts or just information to it. Yeah.
So that's a conversation I'm not interested in having. Not because I can't win, but because I recognize it's not going anywhere. There's nothing our audience can learn. There's nothing you or I could learn. There's certainly nothing he wanted to learn in that conversation. So just kind of getting the vibe that, it's not doing anybody any good. That's a great opportunity to end. If you feel like it's going really well, and you want to end on a high note, that's a great place to end as well. There's been a lot of times where I've been having a conversation with a theist where I'm like, wow, this is actually going really well. We're having a very engaging conversation here. I don't want to ruin this energy, so I'm going to exit as soon as I feel like we've hit a point that can kind of close this chapter. It's like, okay, we found level ground that we agree upon. Great. Nice talking to you. Glad we had this conversation. I would love to talk to you another time. Ending, not overstaying your welcome is a great time to end. Feeling like it's going well, but there's not really, without pivoting to a brand new topic that might harsh the vibe. There's nowhere else to go. End it right there. It can end there. Or if you just feel like it's not great for your mental health to continue to have this conversation, right? I know a lot of times when we're talking to maybe parents or when we're talking to siblings or loved ones who we cannot get a certain idea through their head, and it's like breaking our heart that they're thinking the way they are, that they're refusing to hear anything, that they're refusing to learn. That's also a great opportunity to be like, I love you. I can't continue to have this conversation without being very angry at you. I don't want to spend my day angry at you. I'm going to close this. You can say that, or you can just say that to yourself and leave the conversation. I tend to say that. I tend to say it out loud when I'm talking to people. I'll say, because I love you, I do not want to continue to have this conversation that I know is going to potentially permanently harm our relationship. So I'm just going to let it go. I'll take the L on that one. Because again, people think there's going to be a moment where you see the breakthrough in that person and they're like, my God, I'm going to change everything about myself.
Yeah, that type of like winning a debate, and then like the Tetris sound plays and champagne rains down from the heaven. That's not a realistic expectation for most conversations.
Right. And it helps to remember my own personal experiences where I would leave a debate, quote unquote, and I'd be like, yeah, I got him. And then later I would be like, but that was a really good question. Secretly, by myself, I'm going to look up this question. I'm not going to tell anybody about it because I want to win, but I'm going to look this up. And that's a lot of how I changed my opinions. The people who changed my opinions never really got to see it firsthand because I wasn't going to let them. I'm not going to let them see that they did anything to me. But I have since been able to go back to those people and say, hey, I don't know if you remember like 15 years ago when you asked me this question, but that really stuck with me. I've brought a couple of them back as guests on my podcast too, because I really wanted to talk to them about, the difference. But if you go in thinking you're going to see the product of your hard work, you're not going to see it. If you go in hoping that you leave them with questions that they'll take with them, that'll kind of poke at them and bug them and keep them awake for a while, and they'll look into it, that's a good goal to have, even if you never get to see the fruit of your labor.
Beautiful. Well, I really appreciate all of your insight. I honestly wish I had some of that insight with me this week before getting into some flame wars on Facebook and wherever else. So hopefully it's good advice for somebody out there. But you know what, City, if you can only reach one person, it's really all worth it.
Right.
With that, we've got a little bit of time left in the show. What do you say we talk to Al in Ohio?
Let's do it.
Al, you have some insights into interpreting the Bible. What's on your mind?
Yes. I hear a lot of discussion going on the program, and a lot of it is repetitious. And what I've tried to do is I'm a non-believer to begin with. And what I've tried to do is take an objective view of the Bible and look at some of the questions that came up that don't seem to be answered. And I'll start off, I'll lay a little bit of groundwork. Anytime hunter-gatherers, farmers, and herders come together on the same piece of land, there is conflict. That can be proven by the way when we settled the West, we seen conflict. There's conflict going on right now in southern Mexico. There's conflict going on right now in Nigeria. And I think it's reasonable to say that at that time there was conflict. Okay?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I'm following where you're going with all this, but I think I'm picking up what you're putting down so far.
I'll get to it. This is the groundwork.
Sure.
Now, to get to Adam and Eve, for instance. All right, the Bible says that, it says that Eve was made of Adam's bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. Now, with their limited knowledge, I can understand how they could come up with something like that. But with our knowledge today, we know that the female chromosome has a double X. The male chromosome is a XY. So if Eve was made with XY chromosomes, then Eve would have been a male. And then the theists would come back and say, well, God made Eve a female. So therefore, God would have been the first to make a gender transformation.
Yeah, I mean
And you
that's
argue
definitely
with that.
a way of interpreting scripture. You know, when we try to apply science to mythology, there seem to be some compatibility issues for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now we go back to Cain and Abel. If the Adam and Eve thing was false, which I believe it was, then Cain and Abel were not biological brothers. They were
Let alone
brothers
the
in
like
sense
masses
that
of
they
other
were
people that somehow also existed on the planet at the same time that would have ostensibly been their brothers and sisters.
Right. Like, I'm
Timeline
from
gets
Arkansas.
messy.
I've seen what happens when brothers and sisters have babies. Like,
I beg your pardon?
oh, I was just making a joke. Sorry.
I beg your pardon?
Continue. I'm sorry.
Okay, now let's look at Cain and Abel. I believe that Cain and Abel, Cain was a farmer, Abel was a herder. I think that's indisputable.
Do you think they were real?
I think that was a point. Huh? No,
Well, you
were
mentioned that you
metaphors.
didn't think Adam and Eve were true, so I was curious if you thought Cain and Abel was true.
No, that's just what I'm saying. Cain represented the farmers. Abel represented the herders. Now that was the point where the herders and the farmers divided company, or that's where the conflict began between the herders and the farmers. Okay?
Mhm.
Now, the herders were, at that time, the protagonists. And they were the ones who came up with an idea by looking around and saying, everything is too complicated. It had to be made by some supreme intelligence. So the herders came up with the God issue.
Came up with a god
And
that
the herders-
specifically prefers the sacrifice of a herder over the sacrifice of a farmer. So it's sort of a historical lens for understanding what these stories maybe meant to the people who wrote them. Am I following the way that you're wanting to present all this?
I'm trying to use logic and reason.
Logic and reason to do what, though? I'm not sure I understand your ultimate goal.
To interpret some of the problems that continually come up on the debates. Now we can go to once the let's say the offense began between the herders and the farmers. Okay, they get together now the farmers, they want the herders to join with them in their enterprise. The herders do not want the farmers to join with them. So therefore, they have a debate. And that takes us to Eve and the serpent. Now, you have, at that debate, you have the farmer, the herders, and the farmers, the herders, and the farmers, herders, and the hunter-gatherers. And they're each trying to sway the hunter-gatherers to go one way or the other. The so-called serpent is an expletive used by the herders to describe the farmers.
If you don't mind me asking, are you... I'm still a little bit confused. Are you saying that the Bible is a collection of stories that are trying to basically explain this rift between hunters and gatherers? Are you saying I'm a little bit confused at the point, the overall point you're trying to make?
I'm trying to say that at the time there were people that existed at that time.
Okay.
And there was some conflict between the three groups.
Okay.
And the herders came along, and anyhow, they established this dogma of God. So this, let me reframe this.
Yeah, Al, I appreciate what you're saying, but when we're trying to get a clear understanding of where you're at and where you're going, I heard your response as something along the lines of, at that time there were people at that time. And I don't mean to poke fun, but I do want to say we're having kind of a tough time really following your narrative here. So I'd like to maybe ask you to work some of these details out and see if you can't put together a somewhat more concise argument and maybe give us a call in the future. Would you be open to that?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah, I do find this a really fascinating topic, and trying to understand sort of what the Bible is, where it came from, what it meant to the people who created it. And create is a, ongoing process with a long, complicated history. I mean, it's not just the Council of Nicaea, it's every person who ever decided, no, this is a book that we're going to hold on to. No, this is a book we're not going to hold on to. And what do any of these books mean? And then we're compiling them together. And there's just a very fascinating history of how people interpret the Bible, what it even meant to them. I've talked about it on this show before, but growing up in a very fundamentalist evangelical environment, we were given this notion that the Bible was completely inerrant and that it perfectly contained every single word that God wanted it to contain, which is just a laughable statement on its face, but it's also such a different way of looking at the Bible from most people throughout history. So how should we look at it? What does it mean? What did it mean to the people who wrote it? These are all great questions, and I appreciate you sort of working on that. If you can put that story together for us a little bit more plainly and cleanly, I'd love to hear more from you in the future.
Well, it's difficult because what I'm trying to do on the phone is kind of peruse through the thing. I know you don't have time to listen to the whole story.
Sure, I hear that. So if you want to grab a piece of it and get that on rails, we'd love to hear from you in the future. Thanks so much for your time. Have a great weekend.
That kind of highlights something that I notice in a lot of conversations I have with atheists who want to learn more about conversations with theists and debates with theists, is a lot of times theists don't understand that there is a possibility in which we don't necessarily care about what the Bible says. So for example, a theist will say, you're an atheist. And it's like, yeah. And it's like, so what do you say when the Bible says that Adam and Eve? My answer is always, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Like the Bible
what do
can
you
say
when the whatever book says whatever? Like, okay, I have to be responsible for all of literature because somebody else defined me in opposition to it?
Right. So that's an important distinguishment to make too, is even if a theist comes back and says, well, what about when the Bible says that this and this, I just keep saying, I don't believe the Bible. I don't believe it. It can say whatever it wants. It can say anything at all. It can say stuff that should scare me if it wanted to. I don't believe it's real. So nothing it says holds any weight or value to me. Well, what about Jonah was swallowed by a whale? I don't believe the Bible. I don't believe that. I don't believe any of it. I don't believe Adam and Eve. I don't believe the snake. I don't believe any of it.
What do you have to say about the Bene Gesserit's promise that the Lisan al-Gib will come from the stars?
Yes. Well, I don't know, but I read that tortoises are faster than hares. So I mean, it's been written, so says the book. So I don't know what you're telling me about the opposite, but no, fair to say. And, as we've been talking about different forms of debate and how to have all of these conversations online, it really does just kind of highlight how different not only our worldviews, but our basic sources of evidence, information, of, alternative facts can really become. Yes. Yeah. Just because it's been published somewhere doesn't mean it's real or it's true, right? And when people say, but like, what if Jesus was a real man? What if King David was a real man? We can find his bones. Well, I always say, like, Abraham Lincoln was a real man, but Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer is not a true story.
It's not a
you know
true
what
story,
I'm saying? Like,
sure.
real people can exist and you can make shit up about them as often as you want. It's, what is it called? That like branch of fiction where it's like you write like romances between fictional characters. What's that genre called?
Yeah, celebrity fan fiction, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can write fanfic about whoever you want. It doesn't make it real.
Well, beautiful. This has been a good time. I really appreciated the opportunity to pick your brain and learn from you a bit. And I hope that it's been useful for everybody out there. I want to remind people that the prompt for this week is, what would atheist heaven look like? You can reply in the comments. Tune at the beginning of next week's episode to hear the top 3. I want to again thank Richard for helping out today, as well as everybody else who has helped us to put this show on. And with that, let's send out some love rings and let people know that they can catch us on the tiny.cc/ACD Discord for the Discord after show. Remind people that if you don't believe, this is your community and we appreciate you being here. And if you don't believe, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.